Ahoy, ahoy! It's podcast number 27, last podcast of the merry, merry month of May. The usual order of this podcast is that first I talk about my Dungeons & Dragons musical, then I talk about some original projects I hope to turn into cartoons, then I recap and review a book from my favorite childhood book series, then I watch old Disney films and talk about what concepts from them I can use in my Disney-inspired tabletop RPG. Now, I've said this before, but I really should have made 4 different series instead of clumping them all into a podcast. Anywho, last week I finished my scene-by-scene summary of the musical, so I'm waiting on having some actual music to show you. Once Brian has a song done for me, I'll play it here. Just the first one, which he's kindly doing as a free demo, and I'll keep you updated on production from there. As for the original cartoons, apart from the fact that I'm starting to think they might work better as webcomics, and, be more within our means as webcomics, I ran out of things to say about those months ago, but I'm expecting Ira's art from Stacy and Choice's art from Casey. I expected those 3 things would all be ready in time for this episode, but as of this writing, none of them are. In fairness to Stacy, she never said she'd be ready by this week. She wants to take her time colorizing the character, so it's not a botched, rushed job. She promised me next week, but Casey and Brian both definitely said last Wednesday they just hit some snags, which they're certainly allowed to do. If I'm lucky, I'll have some Choices artwork to talk about for this episode, but I anticipate that we got this, and the adults of Iris shan't be appearing until next week. And with that in mind, let's talk about that Choices artwork. As of this writing, 3 of the 10 characters are done, so I'll definitely display those. Here we have Aerie, a gargoyle rogue based on my sister Aramie. When Aramie saw the pic, she said, "She's perfect," which makes sense, as she's the only person who gave me suggestions on what their character should look like. Having originally conceived the character as being adult or at least a teen, I aged her down so that it would make sense for Aramie to voice her sometime in the next 2 years. And here's Zaya, a fairy ranger based on my other sister Zia, whose exact words upon looking at these characters were, OMG, I love them! I always knew I wanted the character to be tree-like, but just how tree-like she is, that's all Casey. She really ran with that, and I love it. Up next is Christella, a fairy druid based on my friend Christine, though appearance-wise based more on Christine's girlfriend Ilana, because at the time Christine was just coming out as trans, was in a transitional period. She's definitely come into her own now. There'll have to be another character more directly inspired by Christine at some point, planned for Season 2. And as of this recording, I don't have any of the others, but I'm going to be optimistic and suppose that there'll be more of them by the time of recording, and that they'll all be done by the time of editing. If not, I'll be describing characters over a black screen, and it'll be weird, but, yeah. Not to worry, I'll display and talk about the actual images next week. Sorry, almost, tipped over the microphone there. That's, and there's a candy bar wrapper stuck to it. Okay, I really don't have a good place to record here anymore. No table or tray or anything. Anyway, here we have Stacky, a human bard based on Stacy. As mentioned, I figure they call her Stacky because she's stacked. The biggest creative struggle so far in these designs was figuring out exactly how redonkulous her body should be, and I think what Casey sketched is a flawless interpretation. I hope she didn't modify it too much in the final. Natalie, the elf sorcerer based on Natty. Well, the sketch was absolutely gorgeous. I bet the final is too. Kinsey, the pixie paladin based on Mackenzie. I'm very curious about how this one will turn out. The work in progress looked like it would be very interesting and exotic. Mare, the elf rogue based on Meredith. Last time I saw the sketch, I felt she could stand to be a bit thinner being an elf and all, but other than that it was really good. Doesn't wear much. That appeals to me artistically. You see it in Iris and here, and you'll see it in a lot of other D&D and K&K related projects. Hopefully, it doesn't, defy logic with its lack of protectiveness. And the last 3 I haven't even seen sketches yet, because Casey has no experience with animal characters, and so needed some extra time to figure out how to draw a Mishka. But if she gets them done in time, here's Jax, the Mishka cleric, based on my good buddy Jack. Cezanne, another fairy ranger, based on my mom. And Gregorio, human paladin, based on mom's boyfriend Greg. If they're not done, I'm sorry, there was nothing to see. It'll be there next week. And now it's time for Droon Book 24. Well, we're long past the last book that I remember reading as a kid. This is one of the books I very vaguely remember picking up as a teenager, so ultimately I'm not entirely sure exactly how far into the series I got before rediscovering it in my 20s. So here's the cover. Book 24, The Race to Doobesh. I do like how this series takes innocuous things and makes them important later, like how the Horns of Ko were a thing long before Ko was revealed to be a significant part of Droon's backstory. Similarly, the two gems of Doobesh were mentioned long before it was established Doobesh was a place, and now it's a place significance to this right here, book. Okay, enough rambling, let's do this. Chapter 1, Eyes of the Spy. Eric, Julie, and Neil are coming out of a fantasy movie, which they found awesome, but not as awesome as the real lives in Droon. They get a message from Droon via Neil's popcorn. Find the dragon. Getting a sinking feeling this involves Gethwing, they proceed to Droon. The staircase takes them to Firefrog Mountain, where they meet a dragon, alright, Jabbo, who is attempting to make an escape. Chapter 2, On and Off Firefrog Mountain. The trio join Kia, Max, Kid, Spar, and a legion of Firefrogs in pursuing Jabbo. Jabbo turns out to be fleeing a ghostly voice that's been haunting his kitchen, but he wants back in after two flying beasts appear and take him away. Spar explains that the beasts have taken Jabbo to Doobesh, one of the 5 magic cities of Droon, a city of thieves and pirates. There seem to be a lot of such cities in Droon, and now seemingly a gathering place of Ko's beasts. Kia transports the party to Doobesh via the wind. Chapter 3, Follow the... what? They arrive in Doobesh, a city of multicolored towers. There, they run into the fog pirates led by a captain named Yoho, implied to be the same captain who was heard but not seen in Book 14, as he mentions having crossed paths with Kia and Galen several times before. He has no interest in crossing swords with her now, as they have the bigger problem of the beasts taking over the city. The creatures, known only as beasts, come in every possible variation, the only thing they all have in common being that they all have burning red eyes. All of them here to meet Gethwing, who has taken over the palace. The kids and Max stealthily make their way to the palace, where they find that the dragon being venerated is not Gethwing, but Jabbo. Chapter 4, Some Kind of Dragon. Jabbo sneaks the heroes into his snake-drawn chariot and explains that after 400 years of slumber, all any of the beasts can remember about Gethwing is that he's some kind of dragon. And so they captured Jabbo and brought him here in the belief that he is Gethwing. Bringing them back to the palace, he shows them the gate to Bleakwold, where he is to lead the beasts into the Darklands to a forge, where Ko used to make impenetrable armor for his troops. The path to the forge is deadly to any who is not a beast, so Spar comes up with a plan. Jabbo will stall the beasts while the kids turn into beasts and sneak ahead to destroy the forge. The spell will take all night to take effect, so Spar puts them all in a deep sleep. Chapter 5, A Tour of Bleakwold. They awaken. Eric is a green-furred beast with 4 eyes, Julie a blue-furred ice creature with a one-word vocabulary of glup, Neil is a 3-legged fish who can't lower his voice below a shout, Spar is an upright wolf with massive ears, Kia is a giant bird with antlers, and Max a sleek, spiky cat beast. Jabbo smuggles them out of the city, and they make their way to Bleakwold through all of Ko's obstacles until they find a cave. A voice invites them in. Chapter 6, Welcome to My Cave. The little man within the cave can see through their beast disguises thanks to his magical glasses, and Kia correctly guesses that this man is Pasha, inventor of her flying carpet and many other magical artifacts, including some that allow Julie and Neil to speak normally again. Pasha says he's here looking for a magic ring, the Ring of Midnight, which has powers related to the moon. He had heard it was here in the Fog Pirates' cave, but the beasts raided the caves and the ring is gone. Pasha joins their quest to destroy the magic forge. Chapter 7, At the Forge. They soon make their way to the forge, not too far ahead of the army of beasts. They enter and see a trio of massive beasts working on armor and shields. By this point, the beast disguises have faded away, much to Spar's distress, but they come up with a plan. While Kia, Julie, and Neil go off-screen to find the Ring of Midnight, Pasha preps a device called the Blower-Upper to blow the forge into 1,000,000 pieces. Eric and Spar cause a distraction for the beastly smiths, and Pasha sets the Blower-Upper to blow in 30 minutes. Rejoining Kia's group, they find they're there just in time to watch a beast shovel the Ring of Midnight into the flames of the furnace. Chapter 8. Ride the... what? As the beasts begin to file into the forge, the kids and Max use Pasha's magical noodles to enter the forge and extract the Ring of Midnight before it melts and or the whole place gets blower-uppered. When Spar touches the ring, it causes him pain, but not because it's hot. Kia handles it just fine. When they return, Pasha is fighting off the beasts with fireworks as they're beginning to equip themselves with indestructible armor. Chapter 9, The Great Race. Pasha explains that even though he's famous for making flying carpets, he hates flying himself, so he produces a device that transforms into a magic motorcycle called the Pasha-mobile. They ride the Pasha-mobile back to Doobesh, making their way through obstacles using Pasha's other inventions. As they enter Doobesh, they collide with Gethwing just as the blower-upper goes off in Bleakwold. Chapter 10, A Lot to Do. As Gethwing rallies his troops, Jabbo, the Fog Pirates, and the native Doobeshians rally against the beasts. Gethwing calls for a retreat. Jabbo is crowned King of Doobesh, and Kia officially pardons him and the Fog Pirates. Accompanied by Pasha, the main heroes return to Jaffa City. Eric touches the Ring of Midnight and, like Spar, has a strong reaction to it. In the ring, they see Galen, now a much younger man, who congratulates them on finishing their mission and tells them they must now find him. The kids return to the upper world, where there's immediately a ring at Eric's doorbell. A girl named Meredith, who's just moved in down the street, offers them some stuff they dropped back at the movie theater. She departs, saying, "I know you have a lot to do." 3 new guest stars in this episode, since I consider Yoho to have debuted back in Book 14. First is Pasha. The description of his appearance called Steve Buscemi to mind, so I think that'd be a pretty good special guest star. Someone a bit more famous now that we've been on for a few seasons. In the final chapter of the book, Gethwing speaks for the first time, though only in beast language in this appearance. He should be voiced by Frank Welker. One of the most legendary and prolific voice actors of all time, Welker would play Gethwing in some combination of Dr. Claw and Megatron. This being our big bad of the whole series, we want him to sound truly unearthly and inhuman, and Frank Welker can pull it off like nobody else. Certainly better than I can. That hurt. Okay. And finally, there's Meredith. My live-action idea for this character was a young DeVay Chase type. I think that would really capture the very strange, mysterious, and quirky girl of around the main character's age. Having shifted my plans to animation, I think I'll go with fellow TAPAS founder Mackenzie Eby for the role. Final note, Galen appears as Galen Shortbeard in this book, making me wonder if Galen Longbeard is actually in this season at all. I don't recall. I'll have to keep an eye out for him. If he's not in this season, or only in 1 or 2 books, he shouldn't be in the theme song this season. Just something to think about. Today, in Keys and Kingdoms, it's the year 1977, a milestone in many ways. Not only is 1977 the year 0 in relation to the Battle of Yavin, it's also the first year in which 3 movies came out that I found worthy of the collection. So we're watching 3 movies today, yay! It's also the halfway point. 1977 is the year that's halfway between the beginning of the collection in 1937 and the end of it in 2018. And of course, we're not nearly halfway through the collection. There are a lot more Disney movies in the second half of the company's existence than the first half. Today's movies are The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Rescuers, and Pete's Dragon. Since we're talking about 3 movies, I ought to remember to include 3 different time codes. We're starting with The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. I didn't think going in that I'd ever seen this one. I know that it's a package film, a combination of the 3 Winnie the Pooh short films that were made in the 60s. So this is the beginnings of Disney's version of Winnie the Pooh, a very long-running and successful franchise. We open on the iconic live-action footage of Christopher Robin's room, most of the characters depicted as his childhood toys, save Rabbit and Owl, who are meant to represent real living animals. Not a lot of people know that, though more people do now thanks to the film Christopher Robin. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but the Disney live-action remake trend really put a damper on my Keys and Kingdoms ideas by using most of my Keys and Kingdoms ideas. The plan was to depict Disney characters in a realistic art style, but between the remakes and Once Upon a Time, most of the characters have been seen that way by now. Sebastian Cabot is our narrator, and he brings us into the book. The characters interact with the text and words of the book throughout the whole movie. It's clearly a world inside a book, which gets employed in Kingdom Hearts. Let's think about that for Keys and Kingdoms. Books with worlds inside them. And we get that classic theme song by the Sherman Brothers. God, right in the childhood. Pooh's 2 most notable sidekicks, Tigger and Piglet, didn't appear until the second Pooh short film, so Tigger goes unmentioned in the theme song, and Piglet, while in the theme song, has a completely different character design there. Pooh is voiced by Sterling Holloway in his final big Disney role. While most of us grew up on Jim Cummings as Pooh, we mustn't forget that the brilliant performance is essentially an imitation of the inimitable Sterling Holloway. On the subject of Jim Cummings, I believe his innocence as far as the recent sexual harassment allegations. Why do I believe Vic Mignogna is guilty as sin, but Jim Cummings' accusations are the lies of a vindictive ex-wife? Easy. Every colleague Vic Mignogna ever had completely turned their backs on him. He's now living on the backs of his sycophantic fans. Every colleague Jim ever had is defending him and celebrating that the court has determined his innocence. Which helps too, the court does. No one's fired him, no one's dropped him from conventions. I'll grant you that my logic doesn't prove Jim's innocence. It's really my choice to believe that he's the good man I've believed him to be all my life, but beyond a shadow of a doubt, it sure proves that Vic is a nasty little excuse for a human being, and everyone he's ever worked with has always known it, so for realsies, fuck Vic, but I maintain optimism regarding Jim. Anyway, back to Winnie the Pooh. The first short film is Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, a very simple story about Pooh trying to reach a beehive at the top of a tall tree. After climbing it fails, resulting in very little injury because he's a stuffed toy. Note that constructs made of stuffing and fluff are highly resistant to bludgeoning damage, wouldn't you say? Christopher Robin is helping out the animals with their problems. He's voiced by Bruce Reitherman, same kid who played Mowgli. Eeyore is voiced by scriptwriter Ralph Wright. Owl by prolific voice actor Hal Smith. Kanga by Barbara Luddy, also in her final Disney role. And Roo by a kid who sounds pretty cute for a guy who grew up to be Clint Howard. Gosh, the franchise has been so active that it feels really weird to hear their original voices. The cast from the 90s really gave it their own spin. That's how all subsequent portrayals have gone. So stuffing and fluff constructs. Gotta have those. What would their purpose be? Entertaining the children of wizards and the ridiculously rich, I suppose. So there's the Little Black Rain Cloud bit, and I remember reading this story, the actual original A.A. Milne story, as a kid, and there's a brilliant moment where Pooh, intending to disguise himself as the Little Black Rain Cloud, asks how he looks, and Christopher Robin is like, "You look like a bear holding a balloon." Shame that line didn't make it into Disney's interpretation. That was really funny. Anyway, Pooh's deception fails to fool the bees, and they drive him away from the tree, so Pooh goes to visit Rabbit. I forgot about this part. I really thought the whole short would be about the honey tree, since that's the title, but I guess the in which Pooh goes visiting and gets into a tight place part is part of the original first short, too. So Pooh goes to visit Rabbit, played by Junius Matthews, who isn't all that keen on Pooh coming by and clearing out all the food, but once Pooh has determined that Rabbit is home, Rabbit's just too polite to refuse him. Ergo, Pooh overeats and gets stuck in Rabbit's back door. Here we meet Gopher, played by the first voice actor in the film I had to look up instead of remembering, Howard Morris. Gopher is the one main cast member in the Pooh franchise who didn't appear in Milne's books, hence his catchphrase here in the original short, "I'm not in the book, you know." Apparently this is meant to imply that he's not in the phone book, while subtly lampshading the fact that he's not in the source material. As a little kid, I always just interpreted it as him saying he's not in the source material, since the whole movie takes place in a book, Gopher talks in business speak, which isn't really in the spirit of the Milne-esque dialogue we've been getting thus far. Christopher Robin arrives and judges that the best thing to do is wait however many days it'll take for Pooh to get thin again. A few nights later, Gopher comes by with his lunchbox, providing some temptation, but Rabbit stops Pooh just in time from eating still more honey. Honey is disproportionately represented in the diet of the 100 Acre Woods residents. Seems everyone goes around with ceramic jars full of the stuff. And the day comes where they pull Pooh out. There's a musical number to celebrate that day coming. It's just so whimsical. Surprisingly, Eeyore has a singing double. Sounds like Thurl Ravenscroft. It's pretty jarring. So they pull Pooh out of the hole, and he soars over the woods and lands in a honey tree. And that's the first short. Just some classic Pooh shenanigans, and very brief appearances by the supporting cast. What a way to kick off one of Disney's most beloved properties. So charming and funny. Then in the second short, Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, this is when we meet the two guys you can't have Pooh without, Tigger and Piglet, played respectively by Paul Winchell and John Fiedler, the longest-running members of the Pooh cast, who would continue playing the characters until retiring shortly before their deaths in 2005, within a few short days of each other. As the title suggests, a blustery day is just about a windy day in the 100 Acre Wood and how everyone goes about their business, primarily Piglet, who's so small he gets blown around by the wind like a kite. The wind blows down Owl's house, and Christopher Robin, now played by some other kid, comes to help. Eeyore volunteers to find Owl a new house. That night, Pooh meets Tigger, apparently for the first time. The thing about the original voices applies especially to Piglet and Tigger, even though they had the same voice actors in the 90s. People do get older and sound older, after all. Tigger accomplishes very little apart from singing his theme song and casually mentioning to Pooh that heffalumps and woozles are about, and they steal honey. Pooh has a nightmare about such creatures, which, naturally, this being Disney, take the form of a trippy-as-fuck musical number. So, heffalumps and woozles, perhaps they'll take the form of fluffy constructs that are just modified versions of an elephant and a dire weasel. The next day, the blustery day turns into a rainy day, and the wood floods, and as with the blustery day, it's just about how the residents deal with it. Later on, Eeyore says he's found a house for Owl, which turns out to be Piglet's house. 100-acre wood logic. So Owl gets Piglet's house, and Piglet bunks with Pooh. The third and final segment is Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2. Tigger goes around bouncing on everyone. Piglet still lives with Pooh, so there's continuity between the shorts. I like that. Nice touch. On a cold and misty morning, Rabbit, Pooh, and Piglet take Tigger out exploring with the intent of ditching him, then come back to find him the next day in order to humble him. So they ditch him, and he searches for them in vain. Unfortunately, the three of them get lost. Pooh and Piglet reunite with Tigger, who finds Rabbit. Then, next story. Every short tells 2 of the book's stories, just with a somewhat unifying theme, that being honey, the weather, and Tigger, respectively. Oh, excuse me. The second story is about the first snowfall of the year, and Tigger's relationship with Roo, now also played by some other kid. Tigger and Roo climb a tree and get stuck at the top. Meanwhile, Pooh is tracking something. Himself. Around and around a bush, alarmed every time the thing's tracks are joined by another set. 100-acre wood intelligence. As always, it's Christopher Robin, now played by yet another kid, who's brought in to assess and fix the situation. Ultimately, it's the narrator who rescues Tigger by tilting the book. Classic. Something that bounces like Tigger needs to be a K&K creature. Yeah. And then there's the final chapter, which is strangely sad and profound, as Christopher Robin has to go off to school and stop doing nothing all day and hope that Pooh won't forget him. The book closes, and that's how the film ends. Wow. So I definitely have, despite what I thought at first, seen this film before. I remember being very, very little and seeing the whole thing. Just had to see it again in order to properly jog my memory of all the events. Going in, I thought, yeah, sure, the origins of Disney's Winnie the Pooh adaptation. That'll be some nice filler, but my gosh, it charmed my proverbial pants off. I loved it. Up next is The Rescuers, which launches us right into the story. On a wrecked riverboat in the bayou someplace, a little girl sends out a message in a bottle, and the credits roll over a song sung from the perspective of the bottle, weirdly enough. I spotted Ron Clement's name in the credits as an animator. He'd later rise to be one half of a stellar directing team. I always love that, spotting names hidden in the credits that would later rise up and become so big and awesome. On a similar note, I spotted Richard Rich as an assistant director. He too would soon become a director, and thereafter break away from Disney to direct The Swan Princess, Alpha and Omega, and every single one of those 2 films' many crappy sequels. So not as big and awesome. Wolfgang Reitherman, who's directed every animated film of the past several years, is now one of 3 co-directors, along with 2 other guys whose names I don't recognize. So in this film, we learn that when the United Nations gather, so too does a very similar organization of the world's mice, the Rescue Aid Society. This movie is the prime example of the mouse world trope, an entire society of mice or other small creatures who live in secret in a society with many parallels to human society, using scavenged human objects as tools and weapons. This is what Keys and Kingdom's Mishkas are based on, though. To make Mishkas more viable as player characters, they stand about a foot tall, closer in size to a Pikachu than to an actual mouse, so they can't keep themselves secret in the way mice can in universes such as that of the Rescuers, but the way they keep to the sidelines is very much in keeping. There's a Rescue Aid Society delegate from Africa? Yeah, that's a continent, not a country. They only have 1 delegate from the whole continent. Also 1 from Austria and 1 from Vienna. Vienna is a city in Austria. Maybe mice have different borders. 1 around the entire continent of Africa and 1 around just Vienna. Anyway, so the Society have recovered the bottle and the cry for help within. To Morningside Orphanage, New York. I am in terrible trouble. Hurry, help, Penny. The call is answered by the Society's hot bombshell Hungarian delegate, Miss Bianca, played by Eva Gabor, who chooses as her companion the Society's superstitious handyman Bernard, played by Bob Newhart. That's some star power for a 70s animated film, and they embody their characters beautifully. Newhart with his usual shy stammering, and Gabor actually playing a Hungarian character this time. I noticed and was going to write down that the mice in this film have 5 fingers when non-human Disney characters usually have 4. Then I noticed it's only in certain shots that they have 5 fingers. They usually have 4. Weird. Inconsistent. This is the Bronze Age, after all. Bianca and Bernard make their way to Morningside Orphanage to search for clues, and get a lead from the orphanage's cat, Rufus, who explains that last time he saw Penny, many weeks ago, she was moping about not getting adopted, and even though he managed to cheer her up, she ran away shortly thereafter. Penny and Rufus can just talk to each other. That's unusual. Rufus also mentions that Penny was offered a ride by the sleazy owners of a nearby pawn shop, so the mice go there to investigate further, where they find Penny's schoolbook. And here we meet Madame Medusa, played by Geraldine Page. Fun fact, the original intent was for the antagonist of this film to have been none other than Cruella de Vil. Also, Jenny from Oliver and Company was originally meant to have been Penny from this film. Can you imagine if both those things had happened? There'd be 3 Bronze Age films connected by continuity. But neither did. Still, you can totally tell from her mannerisms and driving that Medusa is very much cut from the same cloth as Cruella. Medusa's phone call gives away a shitload of information. She's been searching for a diamond. She's caught Penny sending messages in bottles, and she's going to join her henchman Snoops in a place called Devil's Bayou. Very expositional. Bernard and Bianca attempt to stow away in Medusa's suitcase, but her crazy driving knocks the suitcase out of the car, so they take their own plane. Orville the Albatross, played by Jim Jordan. Sometime during the takeoff, there's a single frame where you can see a photograph of a nude centerfold. At least there used to be. They probably deleted it after the technology to find it in the film and pause it was developed. You know how it goes. We return to the riverboat, where Penny is making a break for it, but is recaptured by Medusa, Snoops, and the alligators Brutus and Nero. Bernard and Bianca arrive during the chase and track down Medusa's lair with the help of Evinrude the Dragonfly, whose buzzing was done by that sound design master, Jimmy MacDonald. We later learn that Medusa has been using Penny to plunder a cave too small for an adult to traverse. She's been collecting gold and diamonds, but Medusa is after one diamond in particular, the Devil's Eye. Bernard and Bianca go to Penny to offer their help. They're not sure how 2 little mice can help, which makes me wonder what the Society's methods have been for the past 1,000 years. Penny is put down the black hole again to find the diamond, and is told that this time she won't be brought out without the Devil's Eye. Since this time Penny has Bianca and Bernard with her, they help her search. They find the Devil's Eye inside a skull, and we get the movie's signature scene, Penny and the mice trying to retrieve the diamond as the tide comes in. Meanwhile, Evinrude leads the charge, the Bayou's local small animal life, to make their move against Medusa. Bernard and Bianca get Medusa with a tripwire, and there's a huge battle for the diamond, with Penny and the animals making their escape. Later, when winter has come, we see a news report of Penny having donated the Devil's Eye to the Smithsonian and gotten adopted. Bernard is made a full member of the Rescue Aid Society, and with the help of Evinrude and Orville, they go off on another mission. So that was nice. Definitely a filler entry. The main characters didn't do much. Not a lot of Keys and Kingdoms inspiration, but worthwhile overall. And finally, we're doing Pete's Dragon. I don't know much about this film. I know it's a live-action film about a boy and his cartoon dragon, and that when its remake came around, I heard a lot about how the original wasn't very good. And as I start watching it, I know that it's over 2 hours long. Joy. Alright, let's get into this. So the credits roll over some nice paintings of landscapes. The cast includes Jim Dale, who I've never actually seen or heard in anything other than the Harry Potter audiobooks. Should be exciting to see him. Mickey Rooney, Red Buttons, Shelley Winters. Pretty good cast overall. Animation director Don freaking Bluth. That's amazing. This is my first time seeing his name in this collection, and he's the animation director. Granted, there's only one animated character in this film, but that's still pretty damn awesome. So we open on Pete riding an invisible dragon quite convincingly. I'm already sold on the film's special effects. And he's pursued by a bunch of rednecks who sing a catchy song about how brutally they're going to murder him. So, first impressions are good. The invisible dragon throws them into the mud, and he manages to shake their pursuit. The next morning, Elliot the dragon makes himself visible. Elliot doesn't talk, but he hums little tunes and makes other burbling noises provided by actor Charlie Callis. Pete and Elliot sing a little duet about their friendship, Elliot's half just going bom 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 bom. The songs in this film are super catchy so far. Pete and Elliot make their way to the coastal town of Passamaquoddy, where Elliot invisibly causes some chaos, while Pete openly speaks to him and about him, so what was the point of him being invisible? Pete is blamed for all the chaos. Lampy, the town drunk, played by Mickey Rooney, is the only person to actually see Elliot, and goes blabbing about it in the tavern, in song. Rooney's not especially convincing at lip-syncing, and the big dance number that follows is pretty pointless. Later, Pete camps out on the beach, refusing to speak to Elliot due to the trouble he caused. Elliot's design and movements are definitely very Bluethian. Somehow Bluth manages to have a signature directing style even when he's working for Disney. That's great. Pete encounters Lampy's daughter Nora, played by Helen Reddy, who runs the lighthouse, and offers Pete a place to stay. Pete has some understandable trust issues, but goes along with her, which causes well-animated mixed emotions in Elliot. Pete explains that he was adopted by the Gauguin family, who treat him as a purchased slave rather than a son, while Nora explains that she had a fiancé who was lost at sea a year ago. Pete and Nora sing a song about Elliot, in which Pete gives a rather inaccurate physical description of the dragon. Clearly the lyricist and the character designer didn't communicate. And, damn, the songs in this film. None of the actors are very good at performing them, but the melodies are just so pleasant and catchy and enjoyable. Just occurred to me, Mickey Rooney is a white-haired balding man in this film made 37 years before he died. Has he been an old man all his life? Okay, he was 57 when this movie came out in 94 when he died. I guess he was an old man for a very long time. Passamaquoddy is then visited by Dr. Terminus, played by Jim Dale, and his assistant Hoagie, played by Red Buttons, clearly a pair of snake oil salesmen. The people of Passamaquoddy are not happy to see them again, but Terminus eventually wins them over with a song, Hoagie slipping into the crowd in a couple of disguises and playing the role of the shill. Classic trope to take note of, the classic Music Man-style con job. Lampy tries to consult Terminus about the dragon. Terminus doesn't believe him, but Hoagie is drunk enough to be convinced to be taken to the cave where Elliot is staying, and there he verifies the existence of the dragon with his own eyes. Nora takes Pete to school, Elliot ever following him invisibly and causing him trouble. After Pete is punished for Elliot's actions a few too many times, Elliot has enough and leaves 2 Elliot-shaped holes in the schoolhouse walls, which convinces Dr. Terminus of his existence. He looks up dragons in a book and learns they have many body parts with medicinal properties. He sings a song about it. So, there wasn't a lot of Keys and Kingdoms material in this film's dragon, apart from invisibility being a very good asset for any dragon spellcaster, since I made the decision early on to use D&D standard dragons, but one thing that can be agreed upon, dragons have many useful parts after you've killed them. So according to the song, dragon liver cures the cold, dragon bone powder grows hair, dragon blood keeps you youthful, dragon cartilage keeps you thin, dragon fat heals burns, and dragon tears clear up your skin. If I make all these facts true in Keys and Kingdoms, that would be a nice open shout-out to this film. Open references to Disney lore like that is a must for the Keys and Kingdoms game book. I replayed the Dragon Parts song several times before continuing the film, because being the villain song, it was among the catchiest and cleverest in the whole film. I love the repeated rhymes and stuff. So, other uses of dragon parts, we know that their scales make a very awesome suit of armor. That's already in D&D, and, perhaps a heartstring makes a good core for a magic wand, if you know what I mean? Think of the medicinal uses of every magical creature's bits. That's one thing that'll really distinguish this game from the regular 5e, the potioneering aspect, like having to collect components in order to cast spells. So anyway, yeah, Dr. Terminus plans to find Elliot, buy him cheap from Pete, and chop him to pieces to profit on all his parts. Terminus makes his offer, but Nora still thinks Elliot is imaginary, and Pete says he can't sell Elliot because he doesn't own him. Afterward, Nora and Lampy offer to make the lighthouse Pete's permanent home, and they sing a super-duper happy song while they paint the lighthouse and clean the windows. At this point, over an hour and a half into the film, the Gauguin family make their second appearance, looking for Pete and immediately realizing they're in the right place when everyone reacts when they mention he often talks to an invisible dragon. They find him and try to take him, singing a musical number about how they have their papers of ownership. The paper actually says bill of sale on it, so I guess the orphanage folks really did sell him to the Gauguins, rather than the Gauguins treating the adoption as if it were a slave trade. That's dark. But Nora rebuffs them, also in song, and Invisible Elliot chases them away. Later, Terminus approaches the Gauguins. They laugh at the fact that he wants the dragon, but team up with him anyway so they can get Pete back. And Terminus recruits some fishermen to help him, since Elliot's presence seems to have driven all the catch away. Then we actually see Elliot for the first time in a while, and he communicates to Pete that he's found Nora's fiancé. Pete tells Nora, who draws the line there, thinking Pete's imagination has gone out of hand. Even Lampy has to admit that he's not sure the dragon is real. They reach a very nice compromise, not to talk about Paul's return until he actually returns. I like that Nora doesn't actually get mad at Pete here. That's nice. So Terminus tricks Pete into the boathouse so the Gogans can capture him. Then they use him as bait for Elliot. Hoagie goes to Elliot and tells him the Gogans have Pete, sending the dragon into a rage. The townsfolk catch Elliot in a net, and the dragon in the net is depicted quite brilliantly through practical effects. Elliot breaks free and is seen clearly by the whole town, and he rescues Pete and defeats the Gogans and Terminus. I'll leave the details to your own viewing pleasure. Then, Pete and Elliot have to help Lampy and Nora fix the lighthouse, Nora being the last person to realize Elliot is truly real, before a ship hits the reef. And who should be on that ship but Paul, who, as it turns out, took a year to find his way back home because he'd lost his memory in a shipwreck. Then Elliot bumped him on the head so he remembered, and he immediately set sail for Passamaquoddy. That's just silly. The whole town celebrates Elliot, who tells Pete that he now must go and never come back. Perhaps some other kid needs him now. So, charming film. I'm not sure why it got such a bad rap when it came back into the public eye due to its remake. It can drag in places, I'll admit, but it's got some of the catchiest songs I've ever heard in a Disney musical. Overall, a good film. Alright, that's the end of today's podcast. Big things coming up in the future. See you next time.